My name is Claire. I am 43 years old, and for the past 20 years, I have lived in the belief that I have a happy family. Together with my husband Thomas, I have built a home, raised our daughter Emily, and created a life that I thought could not be more perfect. We live in a beautiful house in the suburbs of California, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city, where we started our careers and family. Thomas was the man I fell in love with at first sight. He was a successful businessman who took pride in his work and had the ability to do everything to perfection. We had romantic evenings, long conversations about the future, and big plans for our family. It all seemed like a fairy tale, unless you were the one living it. And then one day, everything started to change. But not from any big event, but from little things. Signs that I ignored, warnings that I didn't recognize. I remember one weekend morning when Thomas woke up later than usual. Although his job usually required him to get up early, he lay in bed that day as if nothing was bothering him. I called him to get up, but his only response was a curt, "You go ahead, I'll be right back." I didn't think much of it at the time, thinking he just wanted to sleep in after a stressful week at work. But as the days went on, I began to notice that these little changes were becoming more and more frequent. That evening, as I prepared dinner, I noticed that he seemed to be not paying attention to anything in the family. Simple questions about work or the fun evenings that used to be were no longer answered enthusiastically. He spent more time on his phone than the times when it rang while we were having dinner. The text messages that flashed across his screen, the hasty calls, the times he went out to answer the phone without explaining all of these things made me feel that something was wrong. One weekend morning, as I was cleaning Thomas's office, I came across a small notebook that he always kept on his desk. Flipping through the notes, I found an unfamiliar name, Kate. At first, I thought it might be a new colleague or a client he was working with. But as I turned the pages, I found strange notes. Short messages that were not very important, but seemed to have been written on occasions when he was not with me. Every time I asked about Kate, he would just say that she was a colleague, someone in the company. But my heart could not be at ease. Gradually, questions began to form in my mind. I could not help but feel the signs of change, Thomas's absences, his vague words and strange names. I did not know how to tell him because I was afraid that if I started asking too many questions, he would just take it as his wife's unfounded suspicions. But I could not stop thinking about what I had found. As the days went by, my suspicions grew. I found myself becoming hypersensitive to Thomas's every move. One day, as I opened his phone to check the time, I noticed an unread message from Kate. I didn't mean to look at it, but I couldn't stop myself when I saw the words on the screen. "I miss you." My heart sank. I didn't say anything to Thomas. I didn't want to cause a big argument, but I knew I couldn't live in doubt forever. Part of me wanted to believe I was wrong, that this was just my overactive imagination, but the other part knew something was wrong. Still, I tried to maintain a harmonious atmosphere in the family. I didn't want Emily to feel the change. I didn't want my daughter to face problems she couldn't understand. Every morning I prepared breakfast for the family. Every night I cleaned and cooked and tried to keep everything as normal. But inside me, a weariness was growing. When Thomas came home in the evening, I no longer felt the warmth we used to have. Our conversations became short and cold. His words no longer interested me as before, and I began to feel like I was living with a stranger. One day, while Thomas was away on a business trip, I accidentally received a call from an unknown number. The feeling of anxiety in my heart made me answer. A woman's voice rang out on the other end of the line. "Hello, this is Kate. Thomas, can you come see me? We need to discuss something." At that moment, I knew I could no longer remain silent. This was no longer a doubt. This was a truth that I could not deny. As I awoke one autumn morning to the dim light streaming through my bedroom window, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened over the past week. Thomas was no longer the man I had loved, no longer the partner I had trusted. Small but obvious changes had begun to create an unbridgeable distance between us, and I knew that I couldn't continue to pretend that nothing had happened. Thomas went to work early that day. I woke up at 7 a.m. as usual to prepare breakfast for Emily and myself. I felt different today. I worked hard not only to earn a living but also to give our family a better life. But now, do those efforts still have meaning when I find out that all those sacrifices were meaningless? I lay awake that night, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas next to Kate. The pain felt like my heart was being ripped apart. The name Kate, whom I had never known, now haunted me like a ghost in every dream. I thought my love for Thomas was everything, but now I realized that love was just an illusion that I had created for myself. Emily was sleeping soundly, unaware of what was happening in the family. She still believed that our family was intact, that her parents still loved each other. I couldn't let my daughter know about this truth, at least not now. Emily was too tired of being a college student, and I didn't want to crush her dreams. The next morning, I made a decision that I knew would change my life forever. Thomas was no longer the husband I had loved. The way he had treated me, the way he had abandoned me for another woman, was more than a simple betrayal. It was the end of a marriage that I had trusted and cherished. When Thomas left home to go see Kate, I thought a lot about what I was going to do. I couldn't keep living this lie. I couldn't keep hoping that things would change. I needed to stand up for myself. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I deserved a better life than the one I could have made for myself. I called an attorney who I knew would help me through this. Clayton Richards is a well-known divorce attorney in town. He has helped many women in similar situations to mine. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. I needed to protect myself and my rights. That day, I went to Clayton's office to start my legal battle. I didn't know how to face him, but I knew that this was the only thing I could do to protect myself. Clayton welcomed me warmly and led me into his office. His office was filled with thick books and important documents. This was a space for people who were ready to fight their fate, and I felt that I was not alone when I entered. "Claire, I understand that you are in pain, but I will do my best to help you," Clayton told me as he opened my file. "We need to gather all the evidence of this betrayal. If possible, stay calm and don't let Thomas know that we are about to take action." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief. Clayton had experience handling complex divorces, and I had confidence in his abilities. The legal battle began. Clayton and I set about gathering all the evidence we needed to win the divorce. I didn't want to hurt Emily, but I knew I couldn't continue living Thomas's lie. We requested financial information from the bank for the accounts Thomas and I had opened together. Clayton also advised me to record every conversation and search social media for evidence. I began to dig through old photos and documents that Thomas had secretly sent to Kate. Each piece of evidence was like a knife to my heart, but I couldn't stop. I had to stand up for my rights. One night when Thomas came home, I was ready. I prepared a small dinner like usual, but this time I no longer felt peaceful. I no longer wanted to keep quiet, no longer wanted to wait. I had to face the truth and ask him to take responsibility for what he had done. "Thomas, I need to talk to you," I began, my voice stronger than ever. "We can't go on like this." Thomas looked at me with worry in his eyes, but I didn't care anymore. I had made up my mind. I wouldn't let myself continue living in a marriage where I no longer felt love. I wouldn't let Thomas continue to hide and live a lie. At first, when I started the legal battle, I could not imagine that it would become such a long and painful process. Every day was a challenge, not only legally, but also mentally. I always imagined that I would overcome all difficulties, but the reality was not as easy as I thought. My love for Thomas was torn apart, and now I have to fight to regain my self-respect and peace in my life. But what I did not expect was the shamelessness of Thomas when he not only betrayed me emotionally, but also tried to push me into a fight that he had prepared all along. Day by day, I got used to waking up without Thomas. This house was no longer the home I had loved. Every morning, I faced difficult decisions, from caring for Emily to handling calls from lawyers and preparing for the next steps of independent living. Even though I had decided to divorce, the truth of Thomas's betrayal still haunted me every moment, every second. Clayton has been a huge help in coming up with my legal strategy. He has always advised me to stay firm and not let Thomas or anyone else sway me. "This is not just a legal battle, Claire," Clayton said in a meeting. "This is a fight for your freedom and self-respect. Don't let your emotions blind you." Thomas's betrayal was not just his affair, but also the actions he took over the past few months without my knowledge. One evening, as I was going through my bank statements and financial records, I discovered an account I had never seen before. A joint account in both Thomas and Kate's name. The transfers in and out of this account, the payments I was never told about, made me feel like I had been lied to from the start. Thomas not only betrayed me emotionally, but also financially. He secretly transferred money and even used a joint account to pay for Kate and her children's expenses. Every time I discovered another detail of what Thomas had done, I felt like I was being ripped apart again. The pain was indescribable. I had spent 23 years building this family, keeping it together. Now it was falling apart in my hands, and there was nothing I could do but face the truth. The first day of the divorce hearing, I was very nervous. I didn't know if I had the strength to face Thomas for what he had done, but I had no choice. I had to fight, not only for myself, but for Emily and for our children, so that they wouldn't have to live in an environment of lies and betrayal. Clayton was my guide through the process. "Remember that you're doing the right thing," he said. "Let things happen naturally, and don't worry about what Thomas will do. He created this situation. Now you just have to stay the course." Thomas did not come to the court for the first meeting. It seemed that he could not face what he had done. I saw it when I looked into the eyes of his lawyer. The man was confident, but his eyes could not hide the worry. Thomas was not a man who would accept defeat easily, but he knew that the evidence I had prepared would make it impossible for him to escape the truth. On the second day, Thomas appeared in court. He did not look at me because he was ashamed, but because he knew that he could not justify his actions. But I noticed something strange in his attitude. He was no longer the husband I loved. He had become a selfish person who only cared about himself and things that had nothing to do with his family. During the entire trial, he did not look directly at me once. It felt like he was trying to avoid the truth, as if he did not want to face the betrayal he had caused. Clayton continued to walk me through the trial, and each time I listened to Thomas's attorney try to figure out how to defend him, I felt more and more anger. I couldn't stop thinking about all the years I had sacrificed for this family, the years I had devoted to keeping things together while Thomas secretly tore them apart. I couldn't let him continue to live his life without paying for what he had done. On the last day of the trial, I stood in the courtroom and looked Thomas straight in the face. I no longer felt the pain I felt before. I had moved on, and I no longer wanted to live in the shadow of betrayal. I wanted to be free, not to seek revenge, but to reclaim my life, the life I deserved. "The reason I'm here today is not because I want to ruin Thomas's life," I told the court, my voice steady. "I'm here because I deserve a free life, a life where I don't have to live in lies and betrayal. I love this family, but I can't continue to put up with Thomas's lies." My words were not just the truth. They were the statement of a woman who had decided not to be a victim any longer. And when I saw Thomas in that moment, I realized that nothing could change that. He had lost everything, and I had regained my freedom. When I signed the divorce papers, I didn't feel an immediate sense of relief, but rather an empty feeling, as if I had lost a large part of my life. Even though I was ready for a new life, a life without Thomas's lies, I still couldn't help but feel sad when I looked back on what had happened. 23 years of living together, memories that I thought would last a lifetime, were now just fragments in my memory. But I knew I couldn't let myself be immersed in the past. On the first day of the divorce hearing, I felt like everything was falling apart around me. Not only was I dealing with Thomas' betrayal, but I was also dealing with family conflicts. My closest loved ones were on his side, not understanding or not wanting to understand what I was going through. I couldn't believe that they were supporting a man who had betrayed me all this time. As I walked into the courtroom, I couldn't look at Thomas. He sat there with a cold, emotionless face. I could see the remorse in his eyes, but I also knew it was just part of his wounded ego. He didn't deserve my forgiveness. We have built a family together, but now I have to stand strong, not only for myself, but also for Emily. My daughter is not someone who will suffer betrayal from her father, and I do not want her to live in an environment full of lies. When our divorce became public, I got strange reactions from my family. My mother, whom I loved and respected, took Thomas's side. "You can't do this to Thomas," she said in a tearful phone call. "He's the only man I've ever loved. We can't destroy his life over one mistake." My mother's words shocked me. I couldn't believe that she would defend someone who had betrayed me, someone who had torn my family apart. But I couldn't let my emotions rule everything. I had decided to divorce and protect what I deserved. If my mother couldn't understand, I could only accept the fact that I couldn't continue to live up to her expectations. We had a long talk afterwards, but it only left me feeling more tired. I couldn't change the way my mother saw Thomas, and I couldn't change the past. My decisions had been made, and I couldn't go back. What hurt me the most during this process was not Thomas's betrayal, but the conflict within the family. My daughter Emily was someone I had always tried to protect from the stresses of family life, but when she learned about the divorce, she could not accept it. "I can't believe this," Emily said one evening after we had been to court. "What have you done? How could you treat Mom like this?" My heart sank as I looked into my daughter's pained eyes. Emily had always loved Thomas and always thought our family would always be together. But now she was faced with the reality that everything had changed. I couldn't hide the pain in my heart, but I knew that I couldn't let my daughter continue to live in the family's lies. "I know you're hurting," I told Emily, "but I won't live in a marriage full of lies. We deserve a better life than one without living in the dark." Emily was silent, her eyes filled with tears, but I could sense understanding in her eyes. Emily might not agree with my decision, but she knows that I tried my best to keep this family together. Throughout the divorce process, I couldn't help but feel mentally exhausted. The calls from lawyers, the tense conversations with family, and the sleepless nights left me feeling like I was at a crossroads. I didn't know if I had the strength to keep fighting, but I knew I had no choice. I had to do this for myself and for Emily. I spent a lot of time thinking about what I would do after the divorce. Would I be able to get my life back, or would I be stuck in the pain of the past? I didn't have an immediate answer, but I knew that I couldn't go back. I couldn't stay in a marriage where I no longer felt love, respect, and honesty. Throughout this time, I turned to friends for support. One of my best friends, Laura, was always there to keep me grounded. "Claire, this is your time to find yourself," Laura said in a phone call. "Don't let Thomas or anyone else dictate your life. You deserve better." Laura's words were like a balm. I realized that I had lived for too long for others, too long, dependent on my family and Thomas. Now I needed to find myself again. Not just for myself, but for Emily. I would not let anyone or anything make me feel unworthy. At the moment when I thought I had found peace, another storm hit. The divorce was more than just an emotional affair. It turned into a tense legal battle. A battle I could not lose. Thomas and his attorney did their best to control the situation, find every way to get money from. Meanwhile, I still have to stand firm, keep things from falling apart completely. The first day I met Clayton Richards, my attorney, I felt a small sense of relief. Clayton was more than just an attorney. He was a strategist. He knew exactly what to do and never let me feel weak. As soon as I told him everything I had discovered about Thomas and Kate, Clayton laid out a clear strategy. Claire, we need to make it clear to everyone that Thomas is not only a traitor, but also someone who is trying to take advantage of your honesty. At first, I didn't think there was any chance I would win this divorce. Thomas was not a man to be trifled with. He had power, had influence, and enough money to buy recognition. But Clayton made me realize that in this fight, I was not the weak one. Not only did I have evidence of Thomas's betrayal, I had all the other elements to prove that he was an untrustworthy person who did not deserve any sympathy. Clayton decided to start by requesting all of Thomas and I's financial transactions over the past 23 years. Thomas couldn't avoid the bills that had been sent to him, the shady transactions he had made without my knowledge. We had evidence that he couldn't deny. I had not only bank statements, but also transactions that I had no knowledge of. From travel expenses for Kate and her children to shopping bills for his new family. Each piece of evidence was like a nail in the coffin of Thomas's deception. One of the most important pieces of evidence I had was a photo I found on Thomas's phone of him and Kate and her kids. They were having a great time at a party laughing, and in the photo, Thomas was holding one of the kids. I saw a part of the man I had fallen in love with, but now a completely different man. Clayton immediately requested this photo as evidence in the lawsuit. One weekend, Thomas sent me what he thought was a fair divorce agreement and asked me to sign it. The way he presented it was like a business transaction. No emotion, no apology. He wanted me to give up all of our assets and get a very small portion of them, but I didn't. Instead, I sent a counteroffer with a bunch of documents that Clayton had gathered. In the first trial, Thomas could not say anything more. He knew that he could not control the situation anymore. I had prepared too much, and this time I was not only going to court to settle this marriage, but also to protect myself and Emily. This was not a simple fight, but a fight for freedom, for the respect that I had been deprived of. Day after day, I continued to receive strong support from Clayton. He never let me feel tired or lacking confidence. Every time we met, Clayton reinforced my belief that we were on the right track. He kept asking for more evidence from other bank accounts, from calls Thomas had made to Kate, and even the receipts of purchases Thomas made for Kate's family. Every time I found new evidence, I felt like I was one step closer to victory, but Thomas refused to give up. He hired another lawyer, whom Clayton believed would be a formidable opponent. Things suddenly became tense. However, we were prepared for any eventuality. Clayton had a clear plan, from my reaction to being attacked in court, to using legal evidence to force Thomas to face the truth. Finally, the day of judgment came. I didn't know how I would feel standing in court, but I knew I had done the right thing. Clayton had everything planned out so well, and I felt more confident than ever. Thomas stood there, his eyes not as confident as before. He looked at me, and I saw the weakness in his eyes. He was no longer the strong man I knew. He was just someone who didn't know how to face what he had done. When the judge announced the decision, I could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. I had won. Thomas not only had to divide the assets, but also had to be held accountable for his actions. He had to return to me a large portion of the assets he had taken over the years, and more than that, he had to be held accountable for the betrayal he had committed. As soon as the trial ended, I felt an absolute sense of freedom. Every burden on my heart seemed to have been lifted. I no longer had to worry about my future because I knew I had regained control of my life. The best thing was that I did it all for myself and no one else. But revenge is not what I seek. I do not want to hurt Thomas. I only want to take back what I lost, and now I can move on with my life. The sweetest revenge is not destroying someone else, but rebuilding your own life stronger than ever. Immediately after the verdict was announced, I felt as if a heavy shell had been peeled off my body. It was not a quick release, but a long and emotional process. But I knew that I no longer had to put up with Thomas's lies. I was no longer the betrayed wife in everyone's eyes. I was now a strong, free woman, ready to start over. Every step I took, every decision I made reminded me that I deserved a happier life. Even after the divorce was final, I still faced many challenges, not only legally but also emotionally. Although I had won what I deserved, I could not deny that the scars on my soul were still very real. Thomas had left the house and never returned. I had changed the locks on my doors and had to start all over again. From restructuring my life to facing the things that could not be changed. Every morning when I wake up, I look in the mirror and wonder if I am strong enough to continue. The first few days were not easy. The dreams of the perfect family life I once imagined were still there, but I knew that I had to let go of the past so that I would not be dragged back by painful memories. Dinners without Thomas, moments that I once thought were happy, were now just a part of the past. Emily has begun to learn to cope with the change in our family. She is slowly realizing that we can live happily without Thomas. However, the pain is still evident in her eyes. I can see that Emily feels lost without a complete family. But I do not let her sadness discourage me. I have to be stronger to be an example to her, to show her that no matter what happens, we can still build a new and happy life. One of the things I started doing was rediscovering the hobbies I had neglected during my years with Thomas. I had spent years sacrificing for my family without paying attention to myself. Now I had the time to do the things I loved, but never had the chance to do. I started drawing again, a hobby I had abandoned as a young girl. I am not a great artist, but every stroke on paper brought me a sense of peace. It was a form of stress relief, a way for me to look at my life from a different perspective and find creativity in everything. I also started taking morning yoga classes as a way to refresh myself both physically and mentally. The yoga sessions helped me relieve stress and taught me to love and care for my body. Although I can't deny that the first few days were painful and tiring, I felt a clear difference after each session. In addition to yoga and drawing, I also started rereading books that I loved but had forgotten over the years. I have always had a passion for literature, especially works on psychology and personal development. These books helped me realize that I am not a victim of fate, but a person who can change my life. Each page of the book opened a new door for me to see more clearly about myself and the values that I had lost. On weekends, I joined a book group at the local library. There I met wonderful women who had also gone through hardships in their lives and found freedom after loss. Those conversations helped me see that I was not alone. There were many people out there trying to overcome challenges, and I was not the only one struggling to find myself. One of the key decisions I made during this time was to get involved in volunteer work. I started working for an organization that helps women escape domestic violence and rebuild their lives after divorce. Not only did this work make me feel useful, but it also allowed me to see the positive changes in the lives of the women I met. They were not so different from me, and I realized that I could help them get back on their feet, just as I was helping myself. I met many women who had been in the same situation as me, who had been betrayed, lied to, and felt lost. I shared my story with them and what I had done to overcome it. I realized that when I helped others, I was also helping myself heal. Sharing and listening helped me learn many valuable lessons about perseverance, courage, and the ability to overcome pain. Even though I am starting to feel stronger, the healing process is not always easy. There are nights when I still cry and feel alone. Memories of Thomas and what we went through still come to mind from time to time. But I don't let them drag me down anymore. I know that these emotions are part of the healing process, and I will not let them hold me back. I began to realize that freedom is not just about no longer living in betrayal, but the ability to make your own decisions about your life. Freedom is the ability to love yourself and not feel like you need anyone's permission to live the life you want. I no longer need to seek approval from anyone because I have found my own worth. Emily also started to settle down. She went out and found a part-time job to support herself. Although she was still heartbroken about the change in her family, but I realized that Emily was becoming a strong adult. She not only learned to be independent, but also learned to see life from a different perspective like me. With Emily, I started planning future trips. I had always dreamed of traveling the world, and now I was able to make those dreams come true. My life was back, and I no longer felt afraid of the unknown. My life has changed and is no longer the same as before. A part of me has closed, but a new part is opening up, full of hope and unimaginable opportunities. After the divorce, I am no longer the woman who lived in pain and betrayal. I am Claire, the woman who chose to stand up and face the truth and find myself again. But it is not an easy change when the memories still cling to me, and I am forced to face the things I have ignored in order to move on. I woke up one spring morning in a new house that I had chosen and decorated myself. Everything was new and full of promise. It was no longer the house where Thomas and I had lived, no longer the place where I had buried my dreams. This house was not perfect, but it was a new beginning, a place where I would begin a life without the presence of those who had betrayed me. Every day, I began to feel that I was no longer living in the past, but was part of the present of the decisions I had made. As the morning light streamed through the window, I looked out into the garden where the fresh green grass was growing. A part of me still couldn't forget all that had happened, but I knew I couldn't let the past linger forever. I needed to step out of the darkness, and that's what I was doing. Since my divorce, things have not been as easy as I thought. There are days when I feel tired, and nights when I can't sleep because of the thoughts going through my head. But I don't allow myself to give up. Every morning when I wake up, I feel a little bit of strength inside me. What I have lost, I will never get back, but I know I can rebuild my life. The first day I went out for a walk in my new neighborhood, I felt free. No one was looking at me with judgmental eyes. No one was judging me. I could do whatever I wanted without worrying about pleasing anyone. I asked myself if I could live like this forever. Could I find happiness without needing validation from others? And I realized that I had found the answer. I had and would find happiness, not in a marriage, but within myself. Emily is starting to settle down. She no longer lives in fear and anxiety about the future like she did before. During the divorce, I tried my best to protect her from the stress I faced. I didn't want her to go through the arguments and changes I went through. But now Emily understands things better. Although she still feels lost sometimes, I see maturity in her eyes. Today, when I saw Emily smiling at me at breakfast, I realized that we were starting over, one step at a time. She no longer looked at me as a weak mother. She saw me stand firm in the face of all challenges, and that helped her understand that life goes on no matter what we have been through. We started doing things that I never had time to do when I was living with Thomas. We went for walks in the park, made dinner, and told funny stories. Those little moments became precious memories that I didn't want to lose. Emily is the biggest reason I get up every day, and I know that my daughter will never feel the lack of love, even though I'm no longer with Thomas. One of the biggest changes in my life was deciding to pursue a career that I had long given up on, working in the arts. After my divorce, I decided to take a drawing class at the local art center. This was something I had loved as a child but had neglected because I was so busy raising a family. Now I have the time to pursue my passion, and it is one of the things that has given me more meaning in my life than ever before. The course not only helped me rediscover my talent, but also helped me feel more peaceful. Every stroke, every work is a part of my recovery, my way of healing the wounds that life has caused. I am not a great artist, but every painting is a step forward in my journey to find myself again. Besides drawing, I also attend personal development workshops where I meet strong women who are also trying to overcome their past and rebuild their lives. I no longer feel alone on this journey. I have realized that I am not the only one who has suffered, and that I am not the only one who can change my destiny. In addition to drawing, I decided to embark on a new project, starting a business. After doing some research and learning, I decided to open a small shop selling handmade items that I made myself. This was a big step, but I wasn't afraid. It was an opportunity for me to create my own life without having to rely on anyone else. From hand-drawn paintings to other handmade products, I gradually built an online shop where I could share the products I love and give customers a piece of my heart. Although there is no guarantee of success, I know that this is the right move. I no longer have to hide my dreams. I am doing what I love and finding joy in every little thing. One thing I realized during this process is that I no longer have to live in the shadow of my past. I am no longer afraid to face the painful memories of Thomas and what he did. While I cannot erase the past, I can control it and learn to live with it. I am not a victim of fate, but an active decision maker in my life. When I look into the future, I see a wide open road ahead. I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I know that I won't stop. The steps I've taken in the past have made me stronger, and now I can move forward with confidence in myself. Every day is a new opportunity, and I won't miss any of them. Although I still have many challenges ahead, I am no longer afraid. I have learned that life is not always easy, but it can be good if we dare to change and dare to face the truth. I am no longer a woman who was betrayed, but a woman who has stood up free and strong. As time went by, I realized that although my life had changed completely, I no longer felt lost or regretful. Every day I woke up not as a woman who had been lied to and betrayed, but as a woman who had stood up and taken back control of her life. I no longer lived in the darkness of the past. Instead, I stepped out into the light, looking for new opportunities to discover myself and redraw a new picture of the future I wanted. One of the best things I have found after my divorce is peace. Before, when I was in a marriage full of lies and betrayal, I felt like every day was a battle, a struggle to maintain peace in the family. But now, there is no one to make me worry or hesitate. No one to put me in stressful and deadlocked situations. I can do whatever I want without having to ask anyone's opinion. That freedom is not something that can be bought with money, but something I had to trade and fight for. I no longer have to fear Thomas's unexpected calls or wait behind his silence when he comes home. Every morning I wake up with a sense of relief and freedom. I no longer have to live in the shadow of the man I once thought was my life partner. Now, I am in control of my life, and I am learning to love myself more and more each day. Emily and I have been through this difficult time together. She has matured and learned to face reality, although there are times when she still misses what she has lost. But I know that she has also realized that we can continue to live happily and freely without Thomas. I have done my best to ensure that Emily will not feel abandoned despite the great changes in our family. We traveled together, took new classes, and did things I never had the chance to do before. I didn't want Emily to see me as a sad mother, but as a happy, free woman who was ready to take on challenges. I learned that parenting is not only about love, but also about modeling resilience and overcoming adversity. One of the times we traveled together was a trip to the South Coast. We had a great time together, not worrying about the past. We sat on the sand together, watching the sunset, and sharing stories about the future. These were important moments that I wanted Emily to remember forever. It made me realize that life is not about what has passed, but what we are living and doing in the present. One of the big decisions I made after my divorce was to focus on my career. I had been spending so much time and energy on my family, and now it was time to invest in myself. I found my passion in art, and I started pursuing a lifelong dream. My hand-drawn paintings became popular, and I started getting noticed by customers who loved my work. Not only that, I also expanded my business by creating an online store selling handmade products. From small decorative items to paintings, everything is a reflection of me in every detail. I am not a famous artist, but I am proud to have created a space for myself where I can freely express my creativity without fear of disapproval or judgment. Sure, not everyone can be successful right from the start, but I know that everything starts with a decision to dare to change. I don't want to live in waiting and hoping for good things from others. Instead, I want to create my own opportunities and embrace all that life has to offer. After a long period of loneliness and doubt, I began to learn to open up to the people around me. I was not in a hurry to find new love, but I realized that I could not live in a shell of self-protection forever. I met new friends in social activities, and I learned to trust the people around me. Not everyone was like Thomas, and I needed to open up more and learn to trust again. One of the new friends I met was Michael, a divorced man who works in the arts. We started talking and sharing stories about life after divorce and the hardships we had gone through. Our relationship felt natural and unhurried. I wasn't looking for a new relationship right away, but I found that our connection helped me learn to love not only others, but also myself again. Michael is someone who understands the pain I have been through, and we share experiences and unfulfilled dreams. He doesn't pressure me into a serious relationship right away, but I feel the warmth of his friendship. And sometimes, that gentle, unhurried connection is exactly what I need at the moment. Looking to the future, I feel a new hope in my heart. I no longer feel the pain of the past, but instead, I feel freedom. Freedom to do what I love and not live for anyone else. I am not a woman who always has to sacrifice herself for others, but a woman who is finding herself, rebuilding her life, and opening up new opportunities. With Emily, we have begun a new chapter of our lives. She has found joy and freedom in life, and I am the one who has led by example. I have taught my daughter how to rise from difficulties, how to love herself, and never give up on her dreams. And I believe that she will live a strong, happy, and free life just like me. When I look back on all that has passed, I realize that this process was not just about the end of a marriage, but also a rebirth of myself. Every step I have taken since my divorce has been a step closer to true freedom, no longer bound by the past, because of the blind sacrifices I made for a man who didn't deserve me. What I've been through can't be erased, but they made a strong woman confident and determined. Every morning when I wake up, I no longer have to face the fatigue of a constrained life. My small house, although not big, is full of new memories and simple but sincere joys. No longer are the days of living in fear and pain because of betrayal. Now I am a strong, free woman and ready to take on new challenges. I no longer have to look back, but only look forward to a brighter future. Every time I walk into the living room and look out the window at the lush greenery outside, I feel a sense of peace in my soul.